All right, today, April 28th, Workers' Memorial Day, it is simply a day to honor the dead and fight like hell for the living.
Gentlefolk, rather than bowing your heads and closing your eyes, I'd like to ask you to raise your heads, look one another in the eyes, recognize the beautifully created humanity in each and every one around you, and consider the beautiful diversity that is found in this space. In this space, we will find those who are of varied genders and races, ethnicities, and religious expressions. While Wisconsin might seem homogenous at times, or maybe a lot of times, this space is not. This space is beautifully varied, and it reflects our varied perspectives and our united morality. While we are each on varied walks and journeys, while we have crafts people and teachers, ministers, and many others who are united by a shared worldview that drives each of us to fight for justice, equality, and unity. In this
Good morning, Chad Greenwood, Madison OSHA office. Thank you so much for inviting me to and organizing this event. No one should ever have to die simply because they went to work and did their job. Yet every day in America, an average of 13 people die on the job from a workplace injury, and virtually all of those deaths are preventable. Worker Memorial Day was established on April 28, 1970 by the AFL-CIO to recognize workers who have died or suffered from exposures to hazards in workplace environments. April 28th is also coincidentally the anniversary of the OSHA Act going into effect and OSHA being established 1 year later in 1971. While there has been a decline in fatal work injuries among some demographics, the share of Hispanic or Latino workers fatally injured on the job has continued to grow, increasing from 20.4% in 2019 to 22.5% in 2020. So Workers' Memorial Day is a great time to stop and remember the people who have lost their lives while on the job. On this day, we mourn each of those lives. We reflect on the impact their loss has on their families and communities, and we recommit ourselves to our moral obligation and duty to protect America's workers. One example, on February 24, 2021, Jacob Dayton headed to work like he had done many times before in his young career. He was working on a crew in southern Wisconsin with two other roofers to repair a roof leak at an industrial facility. As he walked across the roof, he stepped on a skylight, falling and suffering fatal injuries. OSHA's investigation later found that tragedy could have been prevented if the employer had ensured safety precautions were in place, such as guardrails, personal fall arrest system, or a cover. Jacob was only 20 years old. Tragically, worker fatalities happen to people of all ages. No parent should lose a son or daughter in a workplace just as their adult lives are beginning. No child should lose a parent, or as the parent is working to provide for the child. And no family member or community should lose a loved one through unsafe working conditions in the workplace.
As first responders, we respond to our communities on the worst days of their lives. And when they're at their worst, we have to be at our best. But make no mistake, grocery clerks, sanitation workers, nurses, farm workers, delivery workers, warehouse workers, teachers, janitors, environmental service workers, and other essential workers are showing tremendous and great courage every day. And when they show up for work, they deserve our thanks and our praise. But these workers deserve far more than the recognition of their bravery. To start, they deserve the dignity, the respect, and safety on the job that all working people deserve, but yet is too often denied. So on this April 28th, on this National Workers' Memorial Day, we observe and remember those that have suffered and died at work. And we recommit to strengthening workers' rights and protections. We will keep fighting to ensure that every worker is safe on the job. And for those that did die, that gave the ultimate sacrifice, always remember that they made a difference in this world because they died doing something that mattered. May they forever be remembered. Thank you.
We worked hard so that our brothers, sisters, and siblings could go home safely every night. However, we are also reminded that to prevent injury, illness, and death in the workplaces of today, we must recognize new threats that emerge from changes happening all around us. We must recommit to sending every person that arrives on the job site home to their loved ones. That commitment must come from the form of regulation, government intervention, and a promise from employers to value the lives of their workers in all aspects of their lives. Safety doesn't happen once, It's perpetual. When we preserve that value, we can protect and save more lives. So let us not forget, and let us take a moment of silence to honor their legacy, their families, and to wish them calm and peace. The 40,000 brothers and sisters and siblings of the Wisconsin Building Trades Council shares our most heartfelt condolences to our families and friends of those we've lost.
I'm here to tell a message to politicians and to corporate America. We will never stop fighting like hell to make sure that there isn't one more death because of safety concerns at work. We've had too many already. We need to fund OSHA quick. This is not a partisan issue. Safety can never be a partisan issue. Safety is an issue that we need to address today. We don't want to be here next year. It is nice that we do remember those who have lost their lives at work, but this is not something that none of us enjoy. We want our politicians to make sure to know that safety is not to be bargained with. It is safety, it's it or it's not. Right now it's not, because you're not funding OSHA.
Over the past couple years, there has been a lot of debate about a lot of things about what goes on or doesn't go on in schools. Yet sometimes we forget that the politics shouldn't be trumping the ultimate question, which is, are we doing it safely? There's a common phrase amongst educators, whether you're talking about a food service worker, a custodian, a teacher's aide, a nurse's aide, a classroom teacher, a social worker, or a principal, which is our working conditions are our children's learning conditions. Let us always remember, as we still wrestle with this pandemic, and as we still wrestle with the myriad of issues that befall our society, that what comes first is always our safety and not our convenience.
Hello, Union family. I am so honored to be with you today. My name is Sherry Signer, and I am a registered nurse at UW Health with 19 years of service, and I'm also a member of our Nurses Union Organizing Committee. The past 2 years have been so difficult for all working people, and especially healthcare workers. Up to 180,000 healthcare workers have died from COVID worldwide. Over 3,600 U.S. healthcare workers died in the first year of the pandemic alone. At UW Health, nurses and healthcare workers were forced to struggle through the pandemic without adequate personal protective equipment, training, or safe staffing levels. And there was an almost total lack of transparency and accountability from executives. As a result, many employees and their family members fell ill with COVID. We witnessed more patient deaths than we ever have before in our careers. In Wisconsin, there have been 1.6 million COVID cases and more than 14,000 deaths so far. At the height of the pandemic, when visitors weren't allowed, we held up iPads so our family members could say their last goodbyes to their loved ones. Without recognition of our union, we've had no meaningful way to address our deep concerns about patient and nurse safety. We are suffering from extreme physical, mental, and emotional exhaustion and trauma. The problems at UW Health were aggravated by COVID-19, but they began long before the pandemic. Back in 2014, UW Health used Act 10 as an excuse to stop recognizing our union and refused to negotiate a new contract. Then they began implementing dozens of dangerous cuts to our staffing levels and benefits. We continue to face risks to our safety. In just the latest example, the UW Health emergency room is constantly overwhelmed with patients, some of them physically combative, and there are too few supportive staff to ensure a secure work environment. Even though the pandemic has been brutal, I still have hope that together we can achieve fundamental change. I am reminded of the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire in 1911. After that terrible tragedy, in which 146 people died, mostly women and girls, there was a surge in union organizing and passage of many of the workplace safety laws that protect us today. Similarly, I believe that all the hardship of the pandemic will lead to the worker organizing on a scale that our nation hasn't seen in decades. UW Health nurses are committed to taking whatever actions are necessary to win recognition of our union so we can advocate for our patients, our communities, our families, and ourselves. So let's all continue to have each other's back and build our labor movement as we fight for good jobs with safety and unions for all. Thank you.
After a once-in-a-century event, it is important that we do take time to reflect and to gather some lessons from what we can learn from this pandemic, what we can learn that has been brought forward through so much tragedy to our community, to our country, and to our world. And one of the things that I hold with me is the need to be fundamentally safe in our workplaces. No one should leave for work in the morning and not be able to return home to their family and their life because of safety issues. As working people across Wisconsin continue to show up day in and day out, unions stand with them, protect them, demand safe working environments, demand for PPE, for better ventilation, for thoughtful solutions to slow the spread of insidious viruses, work to keep our workers safe. Unions are there living their values, working to improve conditions for those that they represent. We know that workers in Wisconsin are the backbone of our state. We know that workers are essential in order for our communities to flourish and for businesses to be able to bring profits home. Yet, for too long, workers' rights have been under attack and diminished, not just here in Wisconsin, but across the globe. With worker safety being at the forefront of national conversations, and we've heard a couple of those stories directly here today, after what we've witnessed through COVID and with corporations and millionaires and billionaires bringing more money home to pad their own pockets at the expense of the people who are creating those profits. It should come at no surprise that across Wisconsin and across our nation, we are seeing a resurgence, a rebirth of workers coming together, standing up, and demanding what it is that they are owed. Respect, dignity, fair working conditions, adequate pay and benefits, and above all, safety. I am encouraged by all those who have demanded this fairness and safety here, today, and across our state. We must remember those who have been lost, but we also need to continue to honor their memory and their legacy by fighting like hell for the living. We are in this together, folks. Let's keep doing the hard work. Thank you.
Next, we have the reading of the names of the deceased to follow with a moment of silence.
Unknown worker, Andrew Amundsen, Andrew Anderson, John Augustine, Dylan Banks, Javerlo Banks, Charles Best, Timothy Bloom, Lantana Boonham, unknown worker.
Unknown worker, Dylan Buckman, Carrie Burdick, Brian C. Bush, Stephen J. Buss, Michael Chamberlain, Jacob Dayton, Robert Dye, Randy Gilman, unknown worker.
Unknown worker, David Gragnani, Michael Grandmason, Jonathan Grunseth, Justin L. Gurney, Gary Hall, Charles Halbrick, James Hepner, Eleanor Kraus, unknown worker.
Unknown worker, James Krogoski, Michael Leahy, Annette Leach, Kevin Lewis, William Lowe, James Ludlam, Scott Matheson, Dennis Meeker, unknown worker.
Unknown worker, Keith Menke, Marvin Meyer, Gustavo
Miranda, Richard Nelson, Dan Ness, Clayton Park, Jesse Perry, Justin Pfeiffer, unknown worker.
Unknown worker, Kathy Phelan, Randall K. Riley, Brandon R. Romo, Christopher Sand, Thomas Stifler Jr., Isaac Segundo Trinidad, Guadalupe Cervantes Veyan, Gary Wallenkamp, unknown worker.
Unknown worker, Jordan Walsh, Craig Ward, Cody Weinecke, Alan Wilds, Vicky Williams Mitchell, Stephen Yep, unknown worker, unknown worker, unknown worker.
The unknown workers represent the more than 8,000 individuals who have succumbed to COVID-19 in the last year, with a total now of over 14,000. We believe it's about 14,411. But this also includes mining workers, military personnel, agricultural workers, where the estimate is between each year 25 to sometimes over 40 workers in the agricultural field. Young workers, also workers driving to and from work, work-related suicides, and those with chronic diseases acquired at the workplace due to dangerous chemicals and similar causes. So we know that there are many more names to read off than just the ones that we said as unknown. And with that, we will now have a moment of silence